family thinks I'm crazy, a podcast where I, your host, try to give you some tips on how you can explain all this weird, wild, crazy conspiracy stuff to the people you love most. Because that's what I've been trying to do for the past 10 years with no success.
I've been telling everybody that our government is shady, but every time I do, my family thinks I'm crazy. The hollow earth, UFOs, aliens invading, fluoride in the water, they swear skies daily. When I talk about these things, they think I'm crazy. There's no escaping anymore the evil that we're facing. Illuminati mind control, they're sacrificing babies. The end of days, but anyways, my family thinks I'm crazy.
What, they don't want to listen to you?
No, they don't want to listen. They don't want to hear it. They're just like, oh, here we go, Mark. Off again with your...
Mark being Mark again.
Yeah. So, that's the thing about podcasts is when you're on the air, and it's like therapy, If I can't talk to my family about this stuff, I'll talk to you, Matt, and all our listeners.
Start your own podcast.
Yeah. So who are we talking about today, Matt?
They think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. They really think that I'm crazy. My family thinks that I'm crazy.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast. Wait, hold on, what? This is the Synchromystic experiment in the ever-expanding now, or as Tara likes to call it, the Synchromystic exploration of the ever-expanding now. Thank you for joining us. I'm sitting here alive from Philadelphia, the great city of brotherly love and sisterly affection. And as our brother Ross Ben has taught us, it is a very mysterious and powerful city. Ross is friends with today's guest. Tara and I learned so much about Michael through his partner, Jenny Rivers. Of course, the Susquehanna River alchemist himself would find such a perfect partner like Jenny Rivers. I mean, come on, folks. The synchronicity should be smacking you in the face right now, but Tara and I are here in Philadelphia, loving it, having a good time, and we thought, what better place than Philadelphia to record this intro. Philadelphia is just so beautiful. We've got so much going on here, and one of the things on our docket is getting on the road in a van that we can live in for some time until we find a way to be abundant with the land, growing our own food, sustaining ourselves off the grid. That's the goal. That's a long-term goal, and I think the Synchromystic exploration of the ever-expanding now is leading us to that point, because this is about goal setting, folks. If you want to achieve your goals, then tune into this podcast, because this is the type of high-level psychology. I think Greg called it metaphysical psychology. Law of attraction is one term you can use, but it's so much deeper than that, as you guys probably know. You're no stranger to these concepts if you're listening to a podcast like this, and if you are, no big deal, because it's easy, it's intuitive, and at the end of the day, you just have to trust your intuition and trust your heart, like Tara and I do. That's what led us together. That's what led us to be on this journey. We're on day 42 now, because it's midnight, 42 of being side by side, and it's so beautiful. And here we are. We went all the way up to Lancaster, New Hampshire. We went to Collinsville, Connecticut, and now we're in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. So the journey really is magical, and the opportunities are there for you, however it will manifest. It might not be the same way it's happened for us, but that's fine. You're a unique person listening to this My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, the first edition of our Synchromystic exploration of the ever-expanding now series of podcasts, where we go in depth with some of the most brilliant thinkers I know and people I can reach out to and get in touch with and have these high-level metaphysical, psychological conversations so you can make those adjustments like I have made over the past 10 years of my life and recalibrate your future so it's more in alignment with your higher purpose and your destiny and who you are meant to be in this ever-present troubling times. It seems like, when we're in this matrix, right? Like, that's something Tara and I discuss often, is how to avoid being in the matrix. And I think, I've had the opportunity to do that through podcasting, helping other podcasters out, working with podcasts. And obviously that's one road, but that might not be your road. But these metaphysical tools that we're going to discuss in this podcast can apply to anybody, no matter what you do. And I think when you look at some of the simplest people, the simplest lifestyles where they're living off the land, it's all about magic. It's all about timing and living in the cycles of harmony in nature. And that's ultimately what you'll find this conversation was about, because Michael Wann's research is largely to do with the Susquehanna River, as you might know, and Jenny Rivers is a menstrual doula, the river of life, the womb. And as Michael Wann talks about, the Susquehanna River is very much a womb for this continent we're on, North America. And it's, one of the largest rivers in the world. It is situated, right where Washington, D.C. is. They situated it on the Susquehanna River for a purpose. The Chesapeake Bay, this big, powerful estuary full of life. It's quite literally, as one of my mentors, Amos, told me, a Garden of Eden type situation, at least before the Matrix came in and built this industrial revolution and kicked out the original inhabitants and all this stuff. But that's part of the story and part of the history that Mike gets into, and the cycles that Jenny brings into the equation. So please, if you want the whole conversation, help us out, show us some love, go over to the Patreon and you'll get the full episode, okay? You get the whole enchilada, the whole burrito. I had a French burrito today at this freaking awful cafe. We won't say their name because we're not that kind. We won't do that to them, but still, I mean, it was a crepe burrito. It was heresy. But anyways, I want you guys to get the whole enchilada, and it's for only $3. You can get it, show us some love on the Patreon. And guess what, here's a little secret if you didn't know about Patreon. You get the first month free. So go there, put your credit card information. It won't charge you. You have plenty of time to leave if you don't like it. You get the whole month of August. So help us out, because we got big plans for the summer. We're going to take this winter. We're used to New England winters, not this winter. We're going to be in the South. We're going to be on the West Coast. We're going to come to you wherever you are. And if you want to participate, go to podinbox.com/MFTIC and leave us a voicemail. Tell us what you think. Tell us why you signed up for the Patreon, why your family thinks you're crazy. That's podinbox.com/MFTIC. And the Patreon's the same thing. Patreon.com/MFTIC. That's where you get the whole Synchromystic experiment in the ever-expanding now. And this is important, folks. These are tools you can use today in your life. So go show us some love on the Patreon with $3, $5. You can even join the $20 tier, and I'll send you a book. I mean, I've got a couple people who've already done that, and they've become friends of mine. Sylvester, my boy, he can call me up whenever he wants because he's a G. He supported me in a big way. And if you get to that level, that's how it is with me. I'm real as fuck, okay? My family thinks I'm crazy. If your family thinks you're crazy, tell us why. Or maybe they don't and you just have something to say. I'd love to hear it. Go to podinbox.com/mftic or go to patreon.com/mftic. Both are great direct ways to get to me. And then, Instagram at My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. You can follow us there. And you listen to the podcast already, so you know where to find us there. But we got a YouTube channel. We got some YouTube videos up that are totally unique. They're not in the RSS feed. So check those out. And then on the Patreon as well. I mean, shit. If you want to see Ari Aselin, that episode we just did, if you want to see all of the pictures he had going on in the background and the cat walking by the screen, sign up for the Patreon and check that out. We got a bunch of videos there and little things from our adventures and whatnot. And yeah, we're all over the map. I mean, if you're into crypto, you can even support the podcast on Breeze. Breeze is a great app. There's a bunch of other apps now that do this, and I'll be sure to show them in the links. But you can go to buymeacoffee.com, support us there if you want. Pretty soon we'll be able to put podcast episodes on buymeacoffee.com, but for now it's just Patreon. So I mean, out of the bottom of your heart, if you want to help Tara and I get on the road in a camper van and really take Alt Media United and My Family Thinks I'm Crazy to the next level, help us out. Show us some love. And you get this whole episode of the Synchromystic Experiment in the Ever-Expanding Now. I mean, come on, folks, say that twice. It's a tongue twister. I did it 10 times already. Let's do this together. Anyways, this intro's gone on long enough. Tara hasn't said a peep, and that's okay. The cute mute over here. And we'll be rocking and rolling. Enjoy this episode with Michael Wann and Jenny Rivers. You can check them out in the show notes. We got all the links. Peace and love. Thanks for tuning in to the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, Synchromystic Experiment in the Ever-Expanding Now, aka the Synchromystic Exploration of the Ever-Expanding Now. Come on now, folks. Show us some love on Patreon. Or buy us a coffee.
Mark, and I appreciate that.
I guess we'll see a lot behind the scenes.
When you play in your day, it's magic. When you play in your future, it's magic. There's certainly like something nice to be like completely like detached.
River symbology is also very important to me. That kind of led me to take the name, Jenny Rivers. But it's like the more we connect to those cycles, it's like a river. The multitude of synchronicities.
This is the first episode? Yeah. Smooth.
I've been thinking a lot about dams, literal physical management of the feminine and the destruction that that's caused on the earth. Symbolically, in a very synchromystic level, how at the same time that this was happening was when the control and management of women's bodies through birth control, obstetrics, silencing women's voices, all of these are dams that we have then created, recognizing the outer and then the inner, with the river being a representation of the feminine.
Current is part of the river. What the hell is it? Don't define it. Recognize it. And when you can go and have fun with it, when we're dealing with these things, whether it's the heavens and the stars or the moon or the moon cycles or the rivers, it's like when we have a story or a lens which we're going to go and see life. And we all do. We already talked about this. We all have these stories. These very, very grandiose concepts, rivers, moons, what have you, they're going to meet you wherever you are. Come to this river with a recognition that it's really, really significant. Look at all of the actual aspects of it, but then being able to apply that to the mystery. Oh yeah, you need water for life. All of life needs fresh water. This is our symbol, our living symbol of fresh water. Don't define it, recognize it. And when you can go and have fun with it and then look at the history and then you're okay, I'm part of it. And Because Jenny was saying, it's like, oh, this is a river that moves through me. That's her lens. And so my lens is history. Whatever your lens is, that's the right one. The liminal space of weirdness, Mark, and I appreciate that.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Scene. Here to discuss what is seen and unseen. I'm your host, Mark Palmer, with my co-host, Tara. Tara, how are you today?
Hi, wonderful.
So excited to get into the first edition of Scene, the Synchromystic experiment in the ever-expanding now, the offshoot podcast from My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. You guys know me. And here with us today, for the first time, for the first episode, someone who I've grown to know really well over the past few months, someone whose work and research has synchronistically found its way into my life and weaved its way into my understanding of a lot of things, the Susquehanna alchemist himself, Michael Wann. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic. I had no idea. This is the first episode?
Yeah, we had that.
This is the first conversation, which is happening right now?
Yep. And by Mike's side is none other than his better half, Jenny Rivers, the menstrual doula. And we're super excited because this is my first time talking to Jenny. And Tara and I have heard a lot about you, Jenny, and we're really excited to have you here with Mike because I know if, Mike, Jenny, measurement, you're definitely... I'm excited to see what's going to happen here. How has life been for you both lately?
Well, first I'll just say thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to be here, and it's great to meet you both. I've also heard a lot about both of you, so I'm really, really excited to see where this conversation's gonna go because I've only been on the periphery. So yeah, I think in terms of how life has been going, it's been pretty wild recently in a really, really good way. We were just having like a pretty fascinating conversation before this, just about this new cycle that seems to have started. And yeah, I think the new world that we found ourselves in, and whether or not that's like what that actually means, and is there anything good kind of going on underneath the surface of what's being presented to us in the news or the mainstream? So, yeah.
So I'll give you my opinion. I'm going to cut to the chase. It's nuts fucking out there. It's nuts. And it is just like everything is in play right now on every single level. But then at the same time, there's this stillness. It's this paradoxical sort of thing. And I think as you can hear, just like, in the tone and in how Jenny and I communicate, like it's this paradox. It's like, I'm like, and Jenny's like smooth. And like, that's kind of like that dance between like everything right now is just like in this, like the liminal space of weirdness. Like that's what I'm seeing, and that's why I'm excited for this to be your the first episode of your offshoot podcast, because it's like, it seems like every moment is like moving closer to like something is about to shift and happen. Now, my sense is it's actually happening. We just are waiting for something. But every time we can find a marker, like a first, which we can kind of ground our stake in, like I'm really excited for it. And this is a marker for all four of us. So I'm excited.
Indeed. Yeah. And I gotta, resonate with that, or state my resonance with that, because it's really been true for Tara and I our relationship feels like, you know, destiny. And I know that's a little cheesy. Everybody kind of feels that way when they're in love. But with the information that we're talking about here, it is kind of a destiny for everybody. We're all reaching this point where something is going to shift. And I wonder if you two felt that same feeling when you met and how you guys got together in the first place. Was it a synchronistic meeting like it was for Tara and I? I mean, I walked into Cafe Atlantique where she was working, and, you know, it all fell into place from there. But, you know, what's your story? How'd you two meet?
Well, I knew of Michael before he knew of me, to be a little creepy, but we're like out of focus. So our children went to the same school, and as it's kind of like an alternative school, it's a Waldorf school. So if you're familiar with that philosophy, but I remember when I first went to the school, there was like a tour that they gave like through this little town of Marietta, Pennsylvania. And we're kind of walking through the little town, and it ends up like the culmination of the walk ends up in this little coffee shop. So kind of funny you guys brought that up, but it ends up in this coffee shop, and everyone's kind of like getting hot chocolate or coffee or whatever. And I tend to like be on the periphery a lot of the times, kind of more like observing. And I kind of like left the group, and I look down and I see this book. This is Rights of the 40th Parallel. And I see the name Michael Wann, and like there was like a visceral reaction in my body where I was like I was really confused, like, because it's very similar to my dad's name. So I almost like thought at a glance it was my dad's name, and then it was like it was really strange. And I also was like, Rights of the 40th Parallel, like, is this about like ley lines? Like, what is this? Who is this person? So I immediately like dove into it, and I ended up meeting a mutual friend, Jana, who helped Michael with a lot of like the editing and stuff with the book, and got her to loan me a copy. And I was always kind of like, who is this person? Like, I want to meet this person, but we didn't meet for like, you know, a couple of years actually, I think, after that. Do you want to say anything about like your experience?
Yes. All right. It's a good question. It's a nice softball, Mark, and I appreciate that. So from my perspective, this is 2018. Mm-hmm. And I had, you know, I've been fighting the need to have to do any sort of like social media for like, I've been kicking and screaming since the very beginning. And it was at that time I first put my thumb or my big toe into the water of Instagram. And I don't know, like, you know, it was weirding me out. And then and after about a month, like I was like, okay, I kind of know what this is. And like the whole thing with social media always had me uncomfortable. And then I got my first like private message, and it was Jen. And it was Jenny. And it was just like, you know, hey, I read your book, and our children go to the same school. And I just wanted to say hello. And so that was an important marker for me. Like markers, like firsts are always really important. And I was like, I remember that because that was the first time I heard it. I remember like being like what's the protocol? Like, how do you respond? Like, I didn't know. And I was with my sister. And so that was the first marker. And that was actually, it was in November. And then right after that, it was my birthday. And because my birthday is in early December, and it turned out that Jenny was moving to Marietta. I responded to her message on Instagram, and she's like, I'm moving to Marietta. I'm like, well, I live in Marietta. And it turns out that she moved into the apartment building directly across the street from me. And she moves in on my birthday. But before I even knew that, I think this happened right before. It was the day before you moved. There was like this huge like event that happened right in front of her building, and it woke me up in the middle of the night. Me too. So it was your first night there. It was like Marietta's a little bit of a crazy town, and it was a car crash of some sort.
And there was like screaming, like there was like a woman. Like
there's a lot of screaming. Like it was a weird way to start.
Yeah.
But that was how it was. That was the unfolding. Like there were like obvious like firsts and certain things which could not be missed. And interestingly enough, that coffee shop, which Jenny was just talking about, that was the building which I lived in.
Wow. Yeah, totally interesting. I always thought, I mean, it was kind of curious, at least until Tara mentioned it with Jenny Rivers, Susquehanna Alchemist. I mean, come on now, folks. It was meant to be. Look at this. You got the River mystery Sherlock Holmes himself here and Jenny Rivers, which I'm sure you're very mysterious yourself, Jenny. So maybe if we can get into that a little bit. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning here this shift, right? Is this in any way congruent with the 13 moon calendar cycle that you and I have been talking much about off the air, Mike?
Well, I didn't know about this 13 moon like calendar system until 2 hours ago when you explained it to me. But I've been studying lunar cycles for probably going on 6 years now of just tracking my own cycle. So tracking my menstrual cycle, overlaying that with the lunar cycle, seeing what patterns emerge, seeing, basically bringing awareness to cycles in general, whether that's the lunar cycle, seasonal cycles, or solar cycles, and understanding, what that is and how we've been so disconnected from that. And so I can't speak to the 13 moon system, but I do understand there's 13 moons, in a solar year. And we've recently, it's been 6 months? How long have we been doing we've changed our personal calendar system. I think he was kind of inspired by what I was doing. And then I was inspired by where he was going with it. And so I've now, my planner is now, the start of the month is on the new moon. And so I do my monthly planning then. And then, every turn of the moon is that's 1 week versus looking at a typical Gregorian calendar. So yeah.
So you were asking about the timing of our relationship with the 13 moon calendar. And I don't think I was as aware at that time with those cycles as we are right now. And I think that's a real interesting story, is moving from what I call the 13 moon cycle to more of just a fluid lunar or natural time cycle. But what I do want to point out before we go there, because I think this is fascinating and I think it's a little bit more basic, because we have these two different kind of feedback mechanisms which are given to us in, the environment of life. One of them is somewhat predictable, which is going to be the lunar cycle. That's very obvious. You can see the moon change, versus the solar cycle, we can track, but it's really not that obvious with the exception of sunrise and sunset. But then the other feedback mechanism which we get from life is synchronicity. That's our other thing which we like to talk about. So it's one is totally random and one is kind of predictable. So my sense is our mine and Jenny's in particular, the coming together of our relationship was very much synchronistic. And then as that has matured, as I've matured as an individual, she's matured as an individual, as we've grown together as a couple, is a lot of that, relating in the synchromistically has then become more grounded in a more predictable, lunar cycle. And so Jenny was saying, she's known, she's tracked her own physiological cycle and linked it up to the cycle you see in the heavens for about 6 years. And I would say for about 6 years, I've been to varying degrees aware of and or following the 13 moon calendar. But it was the coming together really in this past year that all of those things have kind of blended together, just talking and just being aware of what each other brings into it. And it has evolved into something which I think is new. It's new for both of us.
Do you feel because you've done your work individually previously coming together, do you feel spirit brought you together for a certain mission now moving forward?
Is there a higher purpose that called you two together? I mean, clearly you're both sharing a lot of wisdom and light with folks. Do you feel there was some higher purpose that brought you two together?
I mean, I think I know my my work and my understanding both of my work in the outer world and also internally has been greatly influenced by Michael and his work and his understanding. And yeah, I would say, I guess we'll see, like, you know, what happens. Like, we've been kind of like operating in separate worlds, I think, but like doing a lot behind the scenes together. And so, I mean, this is the first time that we've done like something intentionally, like doing a podcast or something together. And so my intuitive sense is, of course, like, I mean, I think everything's kind of divinely orchestrated. That's my personal belief, is that there is no like non-spiritual coming together, like of every relationship. But I do think this is a very significant one in that our work is very complementary and supportive and helps expand the other one in a really powerful way.
Absolutely.
All right. Can I answer that as well?
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to tell you a story, and then I'll let you come to your own conclusion. All right. So this was November 2019. So this is 1 year after we had known each other. Okay. And we're living across the street from each other. And we'd been spending a lot of time with each other, you know, as soon as we were in a relationship, or across the street and, you know, all that sort of stuff. And out of the blue, Jenny's like, hey, you know, a house just came up on the market. And like, you know, I know we haven't been talking about like living together or anything, but maybe we should go check it out. And I'm like, all right, you know, we've got nothing going on today. And so we go and we just go check out a rental house, just like without any sort of thought. And we walk through it and we get like, if you've ever been like, I mean, obviously you guys just went and you've moved into a place. When you start looking at places, like it's exciting, right? When you see something you like, you're like, oh, wow, I could see myself in there. And we got like all excited and we're like, we weren't really talking about like moving in or moving anywhere, but like this has presented itself. And there was a skunk on the front porch when we walked up there, and like everything's lining up, and let's go ahead and let's throw caution to the wind and let's get this place. And so we're like, all right, let's do it. And so Jenny calls up the person. She's like, yeah. I think, you know, draw up the paperwork. We're going to move into this place. And so like, that was like, let's say about a 24-hour period. It was 24-hour period. You're all excited. And then 24 hours passes by. And then Jenny starts looking at me and she's like, are we moving a little bit too fast? You know, I don't know. You know, it's like, we're going to have to move into like 2 weeks. And it's like, there's Thanksgiving that's coming up. And like, I don't know. And I'm looking, oh my God, I like to plan things out. This is kind of moving a little bit fast. And we're like, yeah, we didn't sign anything. Let's do this. Maybe we could back out of this and let's think about the springtime. That's a little bit more our speed. Like, yeah. And we were in my apartment. We're in my apartment in Marietta. And we were going to walk over. Like, it was so freaking weird because our children literally went to school across the street from our two apartments, which were across the street from one another. And she's like, oh, we got to go and like pick up the children. So Jenny's like, well, first I got to go and I need to get something from my apartment. So we go down the 2 steps of the 2 flights in my apartment. We cross the street and then we go up the 2 flights in the 3 flights to your apartment. And there's an envelope. Taped on the door. And she's like, what's this? And that apartment, they were nuts. Like the lady who that's another story, but the lady was nuts. We see this, like, what is this about? And she opens it up and it is I mean, for lack of a better word, it was like an eviction notice. It was like your lease is up January the 1st, and we are electing not to renew your lease. And if you think about this, it's like the worst thing you would do to someone. They're literally saying they're saying that, you know, we'll take it away from personal. They're saying to a young woman, they're saying, we need you to move out.
Single mom, two young children.
Move out on the week between Christmas and New Year's where you're going to find no one doing anything. None of the girls are going to, like, all of that sort of stuff. Like, there's that. And there's like, why am I getting evicted? Like, you know, you got all this sort of thing. So like all of that's on one level, but then the flip side is like, oh, wait, We literally got a place already all lined up to move into. And so like, if we did not have that place, like that would have been a source of like stress and like anger and anxiety. But it turned out to be like literally like 2 minutes after we said we're not going to take the place, but before we called up and said we're not going to take the place, we got that feedback. So, and let me go and give this one like thing, and then I want to hear your comments. It was, so the asterisk to that is not the person who sent the letter. That was a property manager. This was a building that was built 100 and some years ago, and maybe like 15, 20 units in it. And it was managed by a property manager. The owner of the building, who was a local real estate developer, he happens to be the guy who made High Point Scenic Vista, where all of my rights to the 40th parallel. It happened because of this thing with the real estate developer. And like, that's another story. But the same person is the guy who had this apartment building. So he's the one who made us move into this house. Like, that was what like forced the hand to unfold. And this house has been synchronistic ever since then. But that is the level of synchronicity, which I see in the nature of our relationship, and particularly in living in this house. Now you were gonna say something.
Yeah, well, that's not even going into like the multitude of synchronicities once we arrive. But I just wanted to say too, like, the blessing of that was, this is 3 months before COVID. And, what would have happened, in that situation, had we both been living in these apartment buildings, and now we have this like, beautiful house that's got like a forest in the backyard. And, it was definitely divine timing.
Mark, you've seen the backyard of this house, right?
Lovely. Been back there at night and day.
And it's a surprise. Like, it doesn't fit the rest of the neighborhood, does it?
Right. And we talked about this. I have a very similar in my childhood home, where it's like the only yard in the whole neighborhood with an acre of forest behind the house.
Wow.
We didn't even know that when we agreed to like move it. We just saw the house. We just thought it was a regular backyard. And so putting into context, I mean, and I'm using like us as an example, but I think this is true for anyone. Look at the events that have happened in the last year, everything which is happening in the world. Like, we're on that precipice. We're in the midst of the precipice. So every occurrence, like as mundane as it, if you're not seeing the synchronicities, it's probably because you're not paying attention. Like I guarantee everyone, it's like popping off like that, or no matter what, it has to, because that is the nature of what's happening in life right now.
Yeah. That brings me to the mantra that Tara and I have been saying to each other, with a little humor involved, but it's true, the present of being present with presence in the present, or any variation of that, because you do receive these amazing gifts when you're aware of what the universe has to offer. And signs, symbols, and synchronicities seem to be, the pieces that add to the overall story, right? And I think that that's how we tell all information in story form, right, Mike? This is something that you talk about. It's like we can't separate our consciousness from that story kind of thinking. It's beneficial to learning, I think, is to see things from that, beginning, context, and then climax, and then conclusion. It's very suiting to the way we learn. But yeah, is there more you can elaborate there, unless you have a question in mind, Tara?
So, I mean, one, like, there's definitely ways of being without stories. Like that, their whole schools are like how to eliminate stories from like, consciousness. So I don't see it as a competition. I like stories. We Westerners in particular, I would say all human beings are born into story cultures. So I embrace the story. And when you embrace the story, then the, quote unquote limitations associated with stories become the gifts. The fact that every story deconstructs is the beauty of it. What a story does is it gives you meaning. When you want to be devoid of the stories, well, you're devoiding of meaning. Now that comes with like other aspects as well. But, for those of us who like stories, who've grown up on movies, who've learned through stories, who've been part of this culture, well, then it does feel very natural. But I certainly don't think it's the only way. It's just the way I like it.
Well, yeah, and maybe it suits the kind of journey that we're on. But I think when you start to look at life like a story, and there's this overall mystery to uncover. It adds to the energy behind it. I think that that's what we've been experiencing, but I'm curious to know maybe this shift from the past moon to the new moon we're in now, right? July 10th was the new moon. You had it written down, I think, as the grain moon, Mike.
We just moved into the thunder moon. I mean, those are just names. I want to talk a moment about like the difference between just like straight up lunar cycle and then 13 moon cycles or anything with a name. And because it's kind of like what we just talked about with stories. It's like it's not like this is the right way or the wrong way as much as it is like this is the way I'm doing and I understand why I'm doing it. So it's not a competition sort of thing. So that being said, this is my approach. So I used to be when I first discovered the 13 moon cycle, like I was like, wow, there's something really to this. And on the most basic level it is a more, in the best way, structured version of calendaring versus like the Gregorian calendar. What I mean by that is like it's predictable. It's like, 28 days are every month. And it is like, the 13th is always whatever, like a Thursday. Like it becomes very, very predictable as opposed to part of the mental confusion of the Gregorian calendar, which happens both in wordplay by calling like October, like Oct 8, the 10th month, like, there's a paradox, which is put in the mind, to the fact that like, the 13th of every month could be any day of the week. Like there's no consistency. So the 13 moon, like it provides something which is like, it's seemingly more real. There's like, depending upon when you're beginning the lunar and the solar cycles, there's either 12 or 13 years or lunar lunations within one solar cycle. Like you've got all that sort of thing. And that's nice. It's nice. Well, and we kind of hinted at this a little bit earlier, like this coming together of like talking about like cycles, like me and Jenny just like talking about just being alive and like living together is what became clear to me is recognizing kind of like this difference between a circle or like, a loop versus a spiral. Like, they're both like cyclical. They're both cyclical in nature, but one is like this looping around. And when you begin to look at like what actually is versus concepts, like, you've got these 13 months, which are kind of like the Gregorian months in the fact that like it starts on a specific date. Like, this is in the 13 moon cycle, there's like the day out of time. And then you start like the next year after that. I don't remember what that is. I think it's always the same. I think it's in August, if I'm correct, but maybe you can fill me in. That has absolutely nothing to do with whether or not there's a new moon in the sky or there's a false moon or there's a full moon in the sky or there's a quarter. Like it's a system. It's an idea. It's a logical idea. And in my opinion, it is a much more structured and better way of at least structuring your mind than a Gregorian calendar, but it's still absolutely disconnected from what's happening in the heavens. Maybe it'll line up. It's like a crapshoot. So one of the things which Jenny and I started doing is moving forward with like whatever's in front of us. So it's like the new moon is the beginning of the next month. I call them because it's easier. Like that's the nice thing about having like these name moons is like there's a predictability. And by calling it the hot moon or the thunder moon or the grain moon or the harvest moon, like one, it is kind of like an accurate description of the season, the solar season. And there's like, okay, I know where I am. But the truth of the matter is it's like we're expanding into something new every single like lunar cycle. So I want to take one step back. I know I'm talking a bunch and I want to hear everyone else, their thoughts on it, but this is a big deal. I mean this both literally and metaphorically. Every lunar cycle is different. Sometimes it's 29 days. Sometimes it's 30 days. Sometimes it's 28 days. Sometimes it's 8 days from like new moon to full to first quarter. Sometimes it's like 7 days. It's always like right around the same. But the point is it's changing. It's changing. And so there's a degree of predictability, but there's this like there's this dynamic. And my senses and my experience, and again, this is, I'm stepping into this. I've only been doing this for like probably 4 months now, like really, really embracing it, is that you're becoming much more and the reason why is when you plan your day, it's magic. When you plan your future, it's magic. There's certainly like something nice to be like completely detached, but like, if you do have to plan your day, like that is magic. You're saying that. And by aligning your magic with something that you're actually seeing in the sky, versus just a purely abstract idea, which comes from like, whether it's a better abstract idea or, a worse abstract idea, like you just become more in alignment. And then from that, like, the alignment is mirrored back to in synchronicity, sync winks, and all of these sort of things. So that's my thought on it. Like, what's your thought?
Yeah. Well, my thought of it is too, like, well, I kind of put everything in the context of like my own cycle, because that's the truest thing that I know is what's happening in my body and understanding that cyclical pattern. And so in bringing cycle awareness to that becomes like my map to then like navigate the territory of my life, when I know like, specific things that I might feel at the beginning of my cycle or the middle of my cycle. And so I think like, it's such a gift to have that. And I think the more that you connect with any cycle, for women especially, to connect with their menstrual cycle. And this is like, if you're on hormonal birth control, like that's not a real thing. Like you're not then connected to it, because it's like suppressing that connection. And so anytime that we connect with any cycle, that's like, a greater than. So like, we have no control over the menstrual cycle. We've tried to, and it's resulted in like very negative impacts to women in many different levels. But I think the more we connect to these naturally arising cycles, for men, that could be like connecting to the lunar cycle and noticing, how do I feel, on the full moon? How do I feel on the new moon? And not necessarily like writing a prescription for what that means, but bringing a sense of curiosity to that. Like what comes up for me in those. And the more we bring a reverence and an honor to that, it's like we're syncing up. Like I river symbology is also very important to me. And, that kind of led me to change my name to Jenny Rivers many years ago, or take the name, Jenny Rivers. But it's like, the more we connect to those cycles, it's like a river that like etches itself through the landscape. And like it connects us down and it connects us up. So when we're connecting to those inner cycles, it also connects us to the outer cycles. And so, yeah, like it does. It intensifies and amplifies any synchronicities. And it's like confirming that you're on the right track, and it like etches itself into that life experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, right on. I agree with that 100%. I remember one of the moments that led to Tara and I going out was after Mike and I had our conversation. I went to the cafe. I was all excited, and I'm like, hey, you got to listen to this episode I did with this really, really smart guy, Michael Wann, and I think I played a little bit of it or something. I encouraged her to listen to it. I had her email, and, one thing led to another, and here we are going on these journeys up and down the various rivers in Connecticut, and one of the things that we did recently was we stopped down at the Farmington River, because it's cutting around the area where we live at Farmington River Valley. So we stopped off this little spot and bottled up some river water, right? And then a little bit later, Mike calls me and we're on the phone. I got the river water in between me and the, driver's side, right? This will become important in a second. But Mike's on the phone and we're talking and driving down the road. And next thing we know, we come upon this site. I think it's a fox. I'm like, is that a fox in the road? But it's a hawk, eating some roadkill, a possum. We drive right up to it, real close, because I put my hazards on. I didn't want anybody else to hit it, speeding. So we slow down, and I'm talking to you, Mike. I'm talking you through the whole thing. I'm like, oh my gosh, look at what we're doing. I take a picture. this hawk looks me right in the eyes. And why that's important is because when I used to be a delivery guy and I was just driving around in this area, actually, where we now live, I would see the red-tailed hawk, and it was always synchronistic. It would be during certain parts of podcasts I was listening to, or at times when I had the thought like, yeah, I should be doing this myself. You know, I've really always loved communicating about these things, and really to the best of everybody I know, hence the title of my show, My Family Thinks I'm Crazy. But it's you know, all a matter of synchronicity for me, and the podcasting thing led into where I'm at now in so many different ways. But I'm curious to get into this river symbology, or, you know, because what you just laid out there, great tools. That's part of the idea of this here, is to give people the tools to do this themselves in their lives.
I'm going to cut to the chase. It's nuts fucking out there.
And if you are listening to this and you feel some sort of way, reach out to us. Let us know what you see out there in the scene, what's unseen, what is seen. Where can they find you, Mike? Tell them what you got going on and what's in store.
You can find me at susquehannaalchemy.com. That's probably the best place to go. If not there, Susquehanna Alchemy on YouTube right now is where, like, most of the content I put out. I try to put out something like once a week there. If you're interested, if like the way which I see stories and storytelling like appeals to you, like I have a bunch of services where I work with people, and, you know, I look at their stories and I link it up to the heavens and so forth, and I break down stories and help create new ones. And so you could find any of those services for me at susquehannaalchemy.com. And likewise, like Jenny offers a whole bunch of services. So why don't you?
Yeah, if this is something that anyone, women only, that I work with, if this is something that you're intrigued by and that you want to learn more about how to understand your relationship with your cycle, you can check out my work at jennyrivers.com. And I also do mentorship for women, where we go and really delve deep into the archetypes that play out for us every month of our cycling years. And yeah, how to better understand that and support yourself through this journey we call life.
Absolutely, yeah. And I can speak to Mike's Skymancy readings. I definitely feel more clarity after knowing my sidereal chart compared to the tropical chart. And I know Tara's going to be in touch soon with that herself, and maybe even
both of you.
Yeah, some things going on with Jenny Rivers. And I'm sure that'll lead to more conversations here on the scene, the Synchromystic experiment in the ever-expanding now. Mike, Jenny, thank you so much for kicking this thing off with us. I hope you had a good time. And like I said, listeners, get in touch with us. Join us on patreon.com/MFTIC to get the whole thing. And we'll hear you wherever you are in the now, morning, noon, or night. All right. Thank you for listening to the free version of the My Family Thinks I'm Crazy podcast, Synchromystic Exploration of the Ever-Expanding Now, with our fantastic guests, Michael Wann and Jenny Rivers. As a matter of fact, right now, this outro is being recorded from Michael Wann's very own house. That's right. He's a buddy of mine, and we're here visiting. And it's been great so far. More to come. More in store. And if you feel like you didn't get enough from that half an hour, go over to the Patreon, patreon.com/MFTIC. For $3, you can get the whole episode and every other Patreon episode we've done. And there's a lot now, folks. There's a lot of content. If you've listened to every My Family Thinks I'm Crazy free episode, then definitely go over to the Patreon. Or if you want to just check out the scene, the Synchromystic experiment in the ever-expanding now, a.k.a. the Synchromystic exploration of the ever-expanding now, a.k.a. scene. Thank you for listening. Please show us some love on Patreon and show yourself some love. You're missing out. This is a great conversation. You better get the whole thing. Peace.
Motherfuckers, it's a beautiful day to be alive. It's Monday.
You're listening to My Family Thinks I'm Crazy.